Chapter 9, Nation Building and Nationalism. After the War of 1812, the United States emerged as a nation of great potential, wealth, and power. New lands were opened to settlement, a transportation revolution took place, and a mood of confidence prevailed. Expansion and migration. After 1815, the American people shifted their attention from Europe and began to look westward. They saw a rich, unsettled continent still held in part by the English, the Spanish, and the Indians. Extending the boundaries. John Quincy Adams, Secretary of State from 1816 to 1824, deserves most of the credit for expanding the nation's boundary during this time. Taking advantage of Spain's decline, Adams negotiated two treaties, the Adams-Onis Treaty and the Transcontinental Treaty. Under the terms of these treaties, the United States secured all of Florida and reached as far as the Pacific. In terms of actual settlement, however, the West was still east of the Mississippi River. Settlement to the Mississippi. In order to make the land beyond the Appalachians available to white settlers, the United States government initiated a policy of moving the Indians to the west side of the Mississippi. When they resisted, they were forcibly removed. Even so, some southern states felt that the federal government did not push the removal of Indians vigorously enough, and these states claimed their own jurisdictions over the Indians, whom they treated harshly. The land from which the Indians were evicted was sold by the government to large land speculators, who in turn sold the land to small parcels to the actual settlers. By 1840, more than one-third of the nation's population lived west of the Appalachians. Because so many settlers began their farming by being in debt, many immediately went into commercial farming and, therefore, needed access to markets. The Trans-Appalachian West was dotted with small family farms tied to market towns and regional centers. The people and the culture of the frontier. The West was settled by immigrants who carried their cultures with them and who came to escape overpopulation, rising land prices, and worn-out soil. Since farming a new frontier meant starting with fewer tools and less available labor, cooperation and a strong sense of community became necessary for survival. The frontier farmer often saw his or her land shoot up in value in a few years. Many took the opportunity to sell out and move on, thus adding a touch of drifting to the frontier character. A revolution in transportation. Two important and interrelated developments marked this era: rapid improvement in transportation and the increasing use of money and credit in the economy. In an effort to conquer space, the national government built the National Road from Cumberland, Maryland to Wheeling, then in Virginia. In addition, a whole web of turnpikes came into existence, built by private entrepreneurs. Usually, however, the roads did not return a profit, and, though beneficial to the public, they lost their attractions for investors. Roads and steamboats. Nature blessed the United States with a network of rivers that constituted a natural transportation system that greatly encouraged Americans' economic development. Flatboats carried cargo from the upper Mississippi and Ohio Valley to New Orleans, and all along the lower stretches of the great river, cotton plantations built their wharfs. Flatboats traveled in and only in one direction, with the flow of the river. But after 1811, steamboats churned the waters of the West and drove transportation costs down. The steamboat, actually less important than the flatboat, stirred a sense of romance in American people. Congress even abandoned its usual hands-off policy towards private enterprises to regulate safety standards on the great paddle wheelers. The canal boom. No river and no road linked east and west before the state of New York, led by Governor DeWitt Clinton, built the Erie Canal between Albany and Buffalo. Even before its completion in 1825, the canal was an enormous success. Easterners and Westerners paid less for one another's goods, and as a result, New York City grew rapidly as a commercial center. Emergence of a market economy. The desire to reduce the cost and increase the speed of shipping heavy freight over great distances laid the groundwork for a new economic system. The beginning of commercial agriculture. The revolution in transportation had a decisive effect on agriculture. Lower transportation costs meant greater income for farmers. The sale of farm produce to distant markets meant participation in a complex system of credit. The greatest profits went to those who could switch from mixed farming and concentrate on a single crop or staple. Agricultural, in general, became specialized by region. The Ohio Valley became a major wheat-producing region, but the most spectacular successful staple was cotton. Several factors were responsible, such as the invention of the cotton gin, increased demand, and an extensive use of slave labor. Commercial banking. Commercial farming and regional specialization demanded a new system of marketing. Farmers were less likely to sell their harvest directly to the consumer. Instead, they sold their crop to local merchants, who in turn sold it to regional merchants, who then sold it to national and international traders and markets. While farm products flowed in one direction, credit flowed in the other. Farmers were paid for their crops before they were planted. The farmer, of course, paid interest on these loans, and the efficiency of the whole operation lowered total costs and increased profits for everyone. The greater use of credit stimulated the banking system. After 1812, the number of state banks grew rapidly, and they competed to make loans that they made money easier and cheaper to obtain. Congress, fearful of a boom-bust economic cycle, created a second Bank of the United States in 1816 to check the irresponsible behavior of the state banks. Instead, the Bank of the United States added to the problem by making loans easy. In 1819, the nation suffered an inevitable collapse of its money supply. Early industrialism. Manufacturing increased after the War of 1812, but most manufacturing was still done at home. What changed was the way the process was financed. Merchants owned the raw material, which they put out to farm families. Only in the textile industry did a fully developed factory system emerge. The most spectacular example of the complex is operated by the Boston Manufacturing Company at Lowell, Massachusetts. The increasing successes of industry in New England prompted business people in that area to shift their investments from shipping to manufacturing, and the politicians there began to pay more attention to ways in which government could aid industry. Even so, America was not yet an industrial nation. It was the growth of the market economy of national scope that was the major economic development of the period. Politics of nation building after the War of 1812. Because the United States had